Let me start with a truth. Most people avoid high performers have bad days too. They wake up tired, they feel overwhelmed, they doubt themselves. The difference isn't that they feel better than you, it's that they don't negotiate with the day. Most people wait to feel motivated before they act. High performers act because they've decided who they are. They don't ask, do I feel like it today? They ask, what does the person I want to become do? Even on days like this, bad days don't stop them because bad days are expected. They've already made the decision that consistency matters more than comfort. They don't aim for perfect. They aim for progress. One intentional action, one disciplined choice, one moment where they show up anyway. Here's the shift that changes everything. Consistency isn't built on willpower. It's built on standards. When your standards are clear, your actions follow, even when your energy is low, even when your confidence dips, even when life feels heavy. Today isn't about pushing harder. It's about deciding differently. Because the people who win in the long run aren't the most motivated. They're the most committed. And that commitment shows up strongest on the days that test them the most. So if today is a hard day, good. This is the day that defines you. Consistency is not about feeling good. It's about commitment to standards. And this idea alone has the power to completely change how you show up in your life. Most people believe consistency is an emotional game. They think it depends on motivation, mood, confidence, or inspiration. When they feel energized, they act. When they feel tired, stressed, or discouraged, they pause, delay, or quit. Their actions rise and fall with their emotions. And because emotions are unpredictable, their results are inconsistent too. High performers don't live this way. They understand something most people never truly internalize. Feelings are temporary, but standards are stable. Feelings fluctuate every single day. Standards once chosen stay firm. That's why consistency isn't built on how you feel in the moment. It's built on what you have decided matters no matter what. Think about this for a moment. If consistency required feeling good, then no one would ever succeed long term. Every meaningful pursuit includes frustration, boredom, fear, and fatigue. Waiting to feel good before acting is a recipe for a stalled life. High performers know this. So they stop asking themselves emotional questions like, do I feel motivated today? Or am I in the right mood? Instead, they ask a different kind of question. What is my standard here? Standards are not goals. Goals are outcomes you want someday. Standards are behaviors you live by today. A goal says, I want to be successful. A standard says, I show up and do the work, even when it's uncomfortable. A goal says, I want to be healthy. A standard says, I move my body and eat with intention. Even on stressful days, standards remove decision-making from the equation. When standards are clear, action becomes automatic. This is why high performers appear disciplined while others struggle. It's not because they have more willpower. Willpower is unreliable. It drains. It fades. Discipline rooted in standards doesn't depend on willpower. It depends on identity. When someone sees consistent action as just who I am, they don't need to argue with themselves every morning. There's no internal debate. They act because that's the standard they live by. Bad days expose this difference more than anything else. On a bad day, emotions will always try to take control. The mind starts offering excuses that sound reasonable. You deserve a break. Today doesn't really matter. You'll make it up tomorrow. These thoughts don't sound destructive. They sound compassionate. But over time, they quietly lower your standards. One skipped action turns into a habit of inconsistency, and inconsistency slowly erodes confidence. High performers hear the same thoughts. The difference is they don't let those thoughts decide their behavior. They've already decided. Their standard might not be perfection. Their standard might not be intensity. Their standard is consistency itself. Even a small action done with integrity keeps the identity intact. This is where many people misunderstand consistency. They think consistency means doing everything at full capacity every day. That belief actually creates burnout and failure. High performers don't aim to win every day. They aim to show up every day. On great days, they push. On hard days, they maintain. On terrible days, they protect the streak. The action may shrink, but the standard does not disappear. This is powerful because it keeps momentum alive. Momentum isn't built by heroic effort. It's built by repeated follow-through. Every time you act in alignment with your standards, especially when you don't feel like it, you reinforce trust in yourself. You prove that your word matters. And self-trust is the foundation of long-term success. Most people break promises to themselves daily and don't even realize the cost. Each broken promise sends a quiet message. I can't rely on myself. Over time, that message becomes a belief. High performers guard against this by setting standards they can honor consistently. They'd rather do less with integrity than attempt more and quit. Standards also simplify life. When you don't have standards, Every decision becomes emotionally exhausting. You negotiate with yourself constantly. Should I work today or rest? Should I show up or skip it? Should I push or wait? That mental back and forth drains energy before you even start. Clear standards eliminate that friction. There's nothing to decide. The decision was made long ago. This doesn't mean high performers ignore their humanity. They still listen to their bodies. They still adapt. But adaptation doesn't mean abandonment. Rest becomes intentional, not avoidant. Pauses become strategic, not excuses. Even rest aligns with a standard of sustainability, not comfort seeking. Another important shift here is understanding that standards are self-respect in action. When you hold yourself to a standard, you're saying, my future matters more than my temporary feelings. That's not harsh. That's empowering. It's how confidence is built from the inside out. Confidence doesn't come from success first. It comes from keeping promises before success arrives. This is especially important on bad days because bad days test identity. Anyone can act when life is easy. Anyone can feel disciplined when energy is high. But the days that feel heavy are the days that shape who you are becoming. High performers don't fear bad days. They use them. They know that every bad day handled with integrity strengthens their character. Notice how this removes drama from progress. Instead of labeling days as good or bad, high performers label actions as aligned or misaligned. The day doesn't control them. Their standards do. This keeps them grounded, focused, and emotionally resilient. There's also freedom in this approach. When you stop relying on feelings to guide action, you stop riding emotional roller coasters. You're no longer a prisoner to motivation spikes and crashes. You become steady, reliable, calm in your execution. That steadiness compounds over time into extraordinary results. Consistency through standards also creates clarity. When standards are clear, you know what enough looks like on any given day. That prevents guilt, shame, and overthinking. You don't beat yourself up for not doing more because you honored your commitment. You don't spiral into avoidance because the bar is defined. Most people think raising standards will make life harder. In reality, unclear standards make life harder. Clear standards create peace. They give structure to chaos. They give direction to effort. They give meaning to action even when the outcome isn't immediate. And here's something subtle but important. Standards must be chosen consciously. They can't be based on comparison or pressure. High performers choose standards that align with who they want to become, not what others expect. That's why their consistency lasts. It's internally driven, not externally forced. When standards are tied to identity, action becomes non-negotiable but not miserable. It feels purposeful. Even on bad days, there's a sense of quiet pride in showing up. That pride fuels the next action and the next and the next. So consistency isn't about pushing yourself emotionally. It's not about hyper-intensity. It's about deciding in advance what kind of person you are committed to being and then honoring that decision when your feelings try to talk you out of it. That's how high performers stay consistent. Not by feeling good every day, but by refusing to let feelings override their standards. High performers expect bad days and prepare for them in advance. This single mindset shift separates people who stay consistent for years from those who start strong and slowly fade. People don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're surprised by resistance, surprised by fatigue, surprised by life getting messy. High performers remove that surprise. The average person wakes up each day hoping it will be a good day. They hope to feel motivated. They hope things go smoothly. They hope nothing unexpected drains their energy. And when the day doesn't meet those hopes, when stress shows up, when emotions feel heavy, when motivation disappears, they interpret it as a signal to slow down or stop. The bad day feels like an exception, like something went wrong. High performers don't see bad days as exceptions. They see them as inevitable. This changes everything. When you expect bad days, you stop taking them personally. You stop making them mean something is wrong with you. You stop asking, what's wrong with me today? And start saying, this is one of those days. That subtle reframe keeps you grounded instead of reactive. Most people mentally prepare for success, but not for resistance. They imagine how good it will feel when they're motivated, focused, and energized. They don't imagine the boredom, frustration, self-doubt, or emotional weight that will also come with the journey. High performers rehearse both. They mentally walk through the hard days before they arrive. This preparation is not pessimism. It's professionalism. Think about elite athletes, military units, or top-level performers in any field. They don't just train under perfect conditions. They train in discomfort. They practice when tired. They simulate worst-case scenarios, not because they expect failure, but because they respect reality. Life doesn't care about your plans. It cares about your preparedness. Bad days come in many forms. Sometimes it's low energy. Sometimes it's emotional stress. Sometimes it's external chaos. Sometimes it's self-doubt creeping in quietly. High performers don't wait until these moments happen to decide how they'll respond. They pre-decide. They ask questions like, what will I do on days when my energy is low? What is the minimum action I will still take? How will I show up when I feel discouraged? What does enough look like on my hardest days? By answering these questions in advance, they remove decision-making from the worst moments. When the bad day arrives, there's no panic, no inner negotiation. There's a plan. This is where most people get stuck. On bad days, their thinking becomes emotional instead of intentional. Emotions shrink perspective. Everything feels heavier, harder, more overwhelming than it actually is. When you try to make big decisions in that state, you often choose comfort over commitment. High performers avoid this trap by designing fallback systems before emotions take over. Preparation often looks boring from the outside. It's not dramatic. It's practical. It's setting routines that don't rely on inspiration. It's simplifying processes so they require less mental energy. It's having a bad day with your habits. For example, instead of saying, I work out for an hour every day, a high performer might say, on my worst days, I still move for 10 minutes. That 10 minutes isn't about fitness. It's about identity. It's about staying connected to the habit, even when circumstances are unfavorable. Most people abandon habits on bad days because they believe partial effort doesn't count. High performers understand that partial effort counts more on bad days than perfect effort on good ones. The goal is continuity, not intensity. Expecting bad days also builds emotional resilience. When you don't expect resistance, resistance feels unfair. It feels discouraging. It feels like a setback. But when you expect it, resistance becomes neutral. It's just part of the process. This keeps emotions from spiraling. Notice how much suffering comes not from difficulty itself, but from resisting the fact that difficulty exists. High performers don't waste energy wishing the day were different. They meet the day as it is. That acceptance preserves energy for action. Preparation also changes how high performers interpret setbacks. A missed target, a slow day, or a dip in momentum doesn't trigger self-judgment. It triggers adjustment. They don't ask, what's wrong with me? They ask, what needs to change? That question keeps them in problem-solving mode instead of self-criticism. Another key part of preparation is environment design. High performers don't rely on willpower when they're tired. They reduce friction ahead of time. They organize their workspace. They plan their schedules. They remove unnecessary distractions. They make the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. On bad days, even small obstacles feel massive. Something as simple as not knowing what to work on next can stop progress completely. Preparation removes that friction. When the path is clear, action feels lighter. They also prepare mentally for emotional discomfort. They know there will be moments when doubt feels convincing, when quitting feels logical, when slowing down feels justified. Instead of believing every thought that shows up, they treat thoughts as whether temporary and passing. This mental preparation creates distance between feeling and action. Feeling tired doesn't automatically mean stopping. Feeling discouraged doesn't automatically mean giving up. There's a pause, a space where choice still exists. That pause is trained through expectation. High performers also normalize recovery as part of preparation. They don't wait until burnout forces them to stop. They schedule rest. They build margins. They understand that sustainability is not weakness, it's strategy. Rest becomes proactive, not reactive. When bad days arrive, they don't see rest as failure. They see it as maintenance. This removes guilt, which is one of the biggest drains on consistency. Guilt often leads to avoidance, which leads to longer breaks, which makes returning even harder. Preparation also involves clarity around priorities. On bad days, you can't do everything. High performers know what matters most. They identify the one or two actions that keep momentum alive. Everything else becomes optional. This prevents overwhelm. Most people try to maintain the same pace regardless of circumstances. When they can't, they collapse. High performers shift gears instead of slamming the brakes. They adapt the pace without abandoning the direction. There's also humility in expecting bad days. It acknowledges that you're human, that you won't always be sharp-focused or energized. This humility prevents the ego crash that happens when reality doesn't match ideal self-image. Instead of feeling disappointed in themselves, high performers feel prepared. Preparation builds confidence not because it guarantees success, but because it guarantees response. Confidence doesn't come from knowing everything will go well. It comes from knowing you can handle it when it doesn't. Over time, this expectation rewires how high performers relate to difficulty. Difficulty stops being a threat and starts being familiar territory. Familiarity breeds calm. Calm leads to better decisions. Better decisions compound into consistent progress. Bad days don't disappear at higher levels of success. If anything, the stakes get higher Responsibilities increase, pressure grows. High performers don't wish for easier lives. They build stronger systems. They know the future will demand more of them, not less. That's why expecting bad days isn't negative. It's respectful. It respects the reality of growth. It respects the complexity of life. It respects the fact that meaningful progress is rarely smooth. By preparing in advance, high performers protect their identity, their momentum, and their long-term vision. They don't let one hard day undo weeks of effort. They don't let temporary discomfort dictate permanent decisions. And because of that, when bad days come, and they always do, those days lose their power to derail progress. Identity, not motivation, drives consistent action. This idea challenges one of the most common myths in personal growth, that if you can just stay motivated, everything else will fall into place. Motivation is treated like the fuel for progress, the thing that pushes people forward. But motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. It's influenced by sleep, stress, environment, and mood. High performers understand this, which is why they don't build their lives around motivation. They build their lives around identity. Identity answers a deeper question than motivation ever could. Motivation asks, what do I feel like doing today? Identity asks, who am I committed to being? That difference is subtle, but it's everything. When action is driven by identity, it no longer depends on emotional readiness. It depends on self-alignment. Most people try to change behavior from the outside in. They look for tactics, hacks, and techniques to push themselves into action. High performers work from the inside out. They focus on becoming the kind of person for whom the behavior is normal. When behavior becomes normal, consistency stops being a struggle. Think about the actions you never negotiate. You don't wake up every morning asking if you feel motivated to brush your teeth. You don't debate whether you should show basic respect to people you care about. Those actions are tied to identity. They're part of how you see yourself. High performers aim to attach important habits to identity in the same way. When someone says, I'm trying to work out more, that's motivation-based language. When someone says, I'm someone who trains consistently, that's identity-based language. The second person doesn't rely on excitement to act. They rely on self-concept. Acting inconsistently would feel like a violation of who they are. This is why identity-based consistency is powerful on bad days. On bad days, motivation disappears first, energy drops, emotions get loud. If motivation is your main driver, action stops the moment motivation fades, but identity remains. Identity doesn't fluctuate with mood. It's stable. It holds you steady when emotions are unstable. High performers intentionally shape their identity through repeated action. They don't wait to feel like the person they want to become before acting. They act first, knowing that identity follows behavior. Each small act is a vote for the type of person they are becoming. This creates a feedback loop. Action reinforces identity. Identity reinforces action. Over time, consistency becomes self-sustaining. You don't need external pressure because internal alignment is doing the work. Most people underestimate how much energy is spent fighting their own self-image. If you see yourself as inconsistent, undisciplined, or unreliable, every attempt at consistency feels like resistance. High performers change the narrative. They become protective of their identity. They don't want to break streaks, not because streaks are magical, but because breaking them feels out of character. This doesn't mean identity is rigid or harsh. It's not about perfection. High performers don't define themselves as flawless. They define themselves as committed. Committed people still stumble. They still have off days. The difference is they return faster because returning is part of who they are. Identity also changes how high performers talk to themselves. On a bad day, the internal dialogue doesn't sound like I should do this or I have to do this. It sounds like this is what I do. That language matters. It removes friction. It turns action into a natural expression of self rather than a forced effort. Motivation-based systems often rely on external triggers, inspirational videos, quotes, music, or pressure. These can help temporarily, but they don't last. Identity-based systems rely on internal alignment. You don't need to be hyped to be consistent. You needed to be honest about who you're becoming. Another important distinction is that identity shifts the focus from outcomes to character. Motivation chases results. Identity focuses on embodiment. High performers don't just want to achieve success, they want to be someone capable of sustaining it. That requires consistency at the level of character, not just performance. This is why high performers are careful about what they repeatedly say and do, even in small ways. They understand that every action sends a signal to the subconscious. Skip once and you signal that skipping is acceptable. Show up when it's hard and you signal reliability. Over time, the subconscious listens. Identity also creates emotional resilience. When setbacks happen, high performers don't interpret them as proof they're not capable. They interpret them as part of the process. A temporary miss doesn't threaten identity. It's just data. This prevents the shame spiral that causes many people to quit entirely after one mistake. Shame says, this mistake defines me. Identity-based consistency says, this mistake doesn't change who I am. That distinction allows for faster recovery. Recovery is a skill, and identity strengthens it. High performers also understand that identity must be specific to be effective. Vague identities don't guide action. Saying, I want to be successful is too abstract. Saying, I'm the kind of person who finishes what I start is actionable. On a bad day, that identity gives clear direction. They also tie identity to values, not outcomes. Values are stable. Outcomes fluctuate. When identity is tied to values like integrity, growth, courage, or contribution, consistency becomes meaningful. Even when progress feels slow, you're not just working toward a goal, you're living your values daily. This is especially important when results are delayed. Motivation fades quickly when results don't show up. Identity doesn't. High performers continue because stopping would feel misaligned regardless of external feedback. Another powerful aspect of identity-driven action is how it simplifies decision-making. When you know who you are, decisions become easier. You don't weigh every option emotionally. You choose the option that aligns with your identity. This reduces mental fatigue and increases follow-through. Identity also shapes environment. High performers surround themselves with cues that reinforce who they are becoming. Their environment reminds them of their standards. This makes consistency easier, especially when motivation is low. Importantly, identity is not something you discover once and keep forever. It's something you reinforce daily. High performers understand that identity is built through repetition. That's why they protect small habits so fiercely. Small habits are identity builders. On bad days, those small habits matter most. They're manageable. They're familiar. They reconnect you to who you are, even when you don't feel like yourself. One aligned action can stabilize the entire day. Motivation often asks, how do I feel? Identity asks, what does alignment look like right now? That question shifts attention from emotion to behavior. Behavior is something you can control, even when feelings are chaotic. Over time, identity-based consistency creates quiet confidence. You trust yourself because you've proven repeatedly that you show up. That trust reduces anxiety. It reduces self-doubt. It creates a calm sense of capability. High performers don't chase motivation because they don't need to. They've anchored their actions to who they are committed to being, and that commitment outlasts mood, circumstance, and temporary discomfort. That is why identity, not motivation, drives consistent action. Small actions done with intention beat perfect plans. This idea runs against how most people approach growth and consistency. People love planning. They love designing the perfect routine, the perfect schedule, the perfect system. Planning feels productive. It feels safe. It feels like progress without risk. But high performers understand a truth that changes everything. Plans don't move life forward. Actions do. And not massive, heroic actions, but small, intentional ones repeated consistently. Most people overestimate what a perfect plan will do and underestimate what small actions can compound into. They believe once the plan is flawless, execution will be easy. But perfection creates pressure. Pressure creates hesitation, and hesitation creates delay. High performers avoid this trap by prioritizing movement over mastery. A perfect plan assumes perfect conditions, enough time, enough energy, enough focus, enough confidence. Real life rarely provides these conditions. Small actions, on the other hand, are adaptable. They fit into real days, not ideal ones. That's why they survive bad days while perfect plans collapse. High performers don't ask, what's the best possible strategy? They ask, what's the next right action I can take right now? That question shifts attention from complexity to clarity. It brings action into the present moment instead of postponing it to some imagined future where everything feels easier. Small actions also reduce emotional resistance. When a task feels too big, the mind creates friction. Fear shows up, doubt shows up, procrastination shows up. But when the action is small and intentional, resistance lowers. The brain doesn't feel threatened. It feels capable, and capability fuels momentum. This is why high performers break big goals into tiny, executable steps. Not because they lack ambition, but because they respect psychology. They know that consistency depends on how doable an action feels in the moment, especially on hard days. Intention is what gives small actions power. Small actions without intention become busywork. Small actions with intention become identity-shaping behaviors. Intention means you know why you're doing the action and how it connects to who you want to become. Even 5 focused minutes can be transformative when done with presence and purpose. Most people wait for conditions to feel right before acting. High performers act to create better conditions. Action clarifies thinking. Action builds confidence. Action generates energy. Waiting does none of these things. Waiting keeps you stuck in your head where doubt grows louder. Perfect plans often become excuses disguised as preparation. You convince yourself you're being responsible, strategic, or patient when in reality you're avoiding the discomfort of starting imperfectly. High performers see through this. They value progress over pride. There is humility in taking small actions. It means accepting that growth is gradual. It means letting go of the fantasy of instant transformation. High performers are okay with slow starts because they trust compounding. They know that small actions, repeated daily, eventually outperform bursts of intensity followed by long gaps. Another reason small actions work is that they build trust with yourself. Every time you complete a small, intentional action, you reinforce the belief that you follow through. That belief matters more than the size of the action. Confidence grows not from big wins, but from consistent follow-through. Perfect plans often delay this trust-building process. You stay in planning mode, telling yourself you'll start once everything is ready. But readiness is not a feeling that arrives. It's a byproduct of action. High performers don't wait to feel ready. They act to become ready. Small actions also create feedback. When you act, you learn. You see what works and what doesn't. Plans are theoretical. Action is informative. High performers value information over illusion. They'd rather learn through doing than guess through planning. On bad days, this distinction becomes critical. Bad days don't have space for perfection. Energy is limited. Focus is fragmented. Emotions are heavier. A perfect plan becomes overwhelming. A small action feels manageable. That's why small actions protect consistency when circumstances are unfavorable. High performers often define a minimum viable action for their habits. This is the smallest version of the habit that still maintains alignment. It might feel insignificant in the moment, but it keeps the chain unbroken. And psychologically, an unbroken chain is powerful. Many people abandon progress because they believe small actions don't matter. They underestimate the compound effect. One small action doesn't change your life, but one small action repeated over hundreds of days does. High performers think long-term. They respect accumulation. Intentionality also prevents small actions from becoming meaningless. Intention turns repetition into practice. Practice sharpens skill. Skill builds confidence. Confidence encourages more action. This cycle doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. Another advantage of small actions is flexibility. Life changes, schedules shift, energy fluctuates. Small actions can be adapted without breaking consistency. Large, rigid plans often shatter under pressure. High performers design for adaptability, not rigidity. Perfect plans also create an all or nothing mindset. Either you follow the plan exactly or you feel like you failed. That mindset is fragile. One disruption can derail everything. Small actions encourage a both and mindset. You can have a hard day and still move forward. High performers don't romanticize discipline. They operationalize it. Discipline becomes a series of small choices made intentionally. This removes drama from progress. There's no need to feel heroic. You just do the next small thing. Small actions also reduce fear of failure. Failing at a small action carries little emotional weight. You adjust and move on. Failing at a big, perfectly planned attempt feels heavier. That fear keeps many people stuck in preparation mode. Over time, small actions reshape self-perception. You stop seeing yourself as someone who talks about change and start seeing yourself as someone who acts. That shift is subtle but profound. Identity begins to change, and consistency follows naturally. High performers also understand that intention directs attention. When you act intentionally, you're fully engaged. Distraction decreases. Even brief periods of focused action can produce clarity and momentum. That momentum often leads to more action than originally planned. Perfect plans often ignore the emotional reality of execution. They assume linear progress. Real progress is nonlinear. High performers accept this and keep moving anyway. Small actions allow for course correction without quitting. Another overlooked benefit of small actions is how they build patience. You learn to value daily effort over instant results. This patience protects consistency because you're not constantly disappointed by slow progress. You trust the process because you're living it. Small actions also create space for recovery because they don't demand everything from you. They leave room for rest and reflection. This prevents burnout and supports sustainability. High performers play the long game. Ultimately, small actions done with intention are a form of self-respect. They say, I care enough about my future to show up today, even in a small way. That message compounds just like the actions themselves. Perfect plans may look impressive on paper, but they don't survive contact with real life. Small, intentional actions do. And over time, those actions build something far more powerful than any plan ever could. Energy and clarity are choices even on hard days. This idea challenges the belief that energy and clarity are things that happen to us rather than things we participate in creating. Most people wake up assuming their energy level will be determined by how well they slept, how busy they are, how stressed they feel, or how motivated they happen to be. When energy feels low or the mind feels foggy, they treat it as a limitation. High performers treat it as a signal, not a sentence. They understand that while they can't always control circumstances, they can influence their internal state. Energy is not just physical, it's emotional and mental. Clarity is not the absence of confusion, it's the ability to choose a direction even when confusion exists. High performers don't wait for perfect conditions to feel energized or clear. They choose behaviors, thoughts, and focus that generate energy and clarity in real time. On hard days, this distinction becomes critical. Hard days naturally drain energy. Stress narrows thinking, emotions feel heavier. The mind jumps to worst-case scenarios. Most people interpret this as a reason to slow down or disengage. High performers interpret it as a moment to become intentional. They don't ask, why do I feel like this? As much as they ask, what can I do right now to shift my state? That question restores agency. It moves them from passive to active. Instead of being at the mercy of their mood, they become participants in shaping it. Energy for high performers is managed before it's spent. They understand that energy comes from movement, focus, and meaning, not just rest. On days when motivation is low, they don't collapse inward. They move their body even briefly. Movement creates circulation. Circulation creates alertness. Alertness creates engagement. This isn't about intensity, it's about initiation. They also regulate energy through attention. Whatever you focus on grows in importance. On hard days, the mind naturally gravitates toward problems, frustrations, and fears. High performers redirect focus intentionally, not by pretending problems don't exist, but by choosing what deserves attention first. Clarity begins with narrowing focus. Most people try to think their way out of confusion. They overanalyze, overplan, and overwhelm themselves with options. High performers simplify. They ask, what matters most right now? That single question cuts through mental noise. Clarity doesn't mean knowing every step. It means knowing the next step. High performers don't require certainty to move forward. They require direction. Even a temporary direction is enough to create momentum. Momentum, in turn, creates more clarity. On hard days, clarity often comes after action, not before. High performers accept this. They don't wait to feel mentally sharp before starting. They start to become mentally sharp. Action organizes thought. Engagement sharpens focus. Stillness without intention often leads to rumination. Energy is also influenced by meaning. High performers reconnect to purpose on hard days. They remind themselves why the effort matters, not in a dramatic way, but in a grounded one. Purpose doesn't always feel inspiring, but it feels stabilizing. It provides context when emotions feel chaotic. They also protect their energy by managing emotional input. High performers are selective about what they consume, especially on low-energy days. They limit exposure to negativity, distraction, and comparison. They understand that energy leaks through attention. Clarity is protected the same way. They reduce decision fatigue by sticking to routines and standards. When clarity is low, structure becomes support. Routines don't restrict freedom, they preserve mental bandwidth. High performers rely on structure more, not less, when days are hard. Another key distinction is that high performers don't confuse low energy with incapability. Feeling tired doesn't mean you're incapable of meaningful action. Feeling unclear doesn't mean you're lost. These states are temporary, but many people treat them as permanent. High performers see energy and clarity as dynamic states. They fluctuate, but they're responsive. A single choice can shift them. A walk, a conversation, a written list, a deep breath, a change in posture. These may seem small, but they change physiology and focus. They also understand that complaining drains energy while responsibility restores it. Complaining keeps attention on what's wrong. Responsibility asks, what's within my control? That shift alone can restore a sense of power, which fuels energy. Clarity also improves when high performers stop demanding emotional certainty. Most confusion comes from wanting guarantees, wanting to know how everything will turn out, wanting reassurance. High performers accept uncertainty and act anyway. This reduces mental tension. On hard days, they don't try to solve their entire life. They zoom in. They reduce the scope. What's one thing I can do well right now? That question anchors clarity and action instead of abstraction. Energy is also relational. High performers are intentional about who they engage with. They seek conversations that elevate perspective, not drain it. Even brief connection can reframe a day. Isolation often amplifies fatigue and confusion. They also manage energy through self-talk. On hard days, the internal voice can become critical or catastrophic. High performers challenge that voice, not with fake positivity, but with grounded truth. This is hard, but I can handle hard. That kind of language stabilizes the nervous system. Clarity improves when emotion is acknowledged rather than suppressed. High performers don't ignore how they feel, they name it. Naming emotions reduces their intensity. Once emotions are named, they stop dominating attention, allowing clarity to return. Energy is further protected by boundaries. High performers say no when needed. They don't overcommit on hard days to prove something. They respect their capacity without abandoning their standards. That balance preserves long-term consistency. They also recognize that clarity is often lost when expectations are unrealistic. On hard days, they adjust expectations without abandoning direction. This prevents disappointment from compounding into disengagement. High performers also use reflection strategically. They don't ruminate. They reflect briefly and move on. They ask, what's the lesson here? And then return to action. This keeps learning high and emotional drag low. Energy grows when progress is visible. High performers create visible wins, even small ones, checking something off a list, completing a short task. These wins send a signal of competence, which restores energy. Clarity also grows when priorities are visible. Writing things down externalizes thought. It reduces mental clutter. High performers don't try to hold everything in their head, especially on hard days. They also understand that energy and clarity are not moral qualities. Low energy doesn't mean laziness. Lack of clarity doesn't mean failure. Treating these states with judgment only drains more energy. Treating them with curiosity restores it. Over time, high performers develop trust in their ability to generate energy and clarity. This trust reduces panic when those states dip. They know from experience that they can shift their state through choice and action. Hard days lose their power when you stop believing they dictate your capacity. Energy and clarity are not gifts reserved for good days. They are responses you practice, especially on hard ones. High performers don't deny difficulty. They work with it. They choose behaviors that create momentum. They choose focus over overwhelm. They choose engagement over withdrawal. That is why, even when the day feels heavy, they remain effective. Not because they feel better, but because they choose better responses. Consistency isn't proven on your best days. It's proven on the days when everything in you wants to slow down, step back, or wait for a better moment. Those days aren't obstacles. They're the training ground. You don't need more motivation. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to feel ready. What you need is a decision to act in alignment with who you are becoming, even when the effort feels small and the progress feels quiet. Every time you show up on a hard day, you're not just completing a task. You're building identity. You're reinforcing standards. You're proving to yourself that you can be trusted, and that trust compounds into confidence, momentum, and long-term success. So don't wait for the day to feel easier. Don't wait for clarity to magically appear. Choose one intentional action and take it now, because the people who win in the long run aren't the most inspired. They're the most consistent. And that consistency begins with the next action you take.